Last time we were in class, y'all said you wanted to continue our study in the book of Revelation. And assuming that that's still true, that's what we're going to do. So we had actually covered some in Revelation 12, but I thought I'd reboot by taking one step back and then moving forward. And Revelation 12 is pretty easy as far as the meaning of it. So we'll get in here. The ministers this morning were discussing the word prophecy, which is going to be the word that Dustin preaches on Sunday. Prophecy, most of us, when we hear the word prophecy, we think of somebody foretelling something that's going to happen in the future. That really isn't the biblical meaning of the word prophecy. The word prophecy means just a divine revelation that was directly given to a person like Peter, Paul, Moses, Jeremiah, take your pick. When God directly spoke to a man and that man had a direct verbal message and he could give it out, that's prophecy, whether it's just preaching about what you need to do to repent, or whether it's telling the story of creation like Moses did when he wrote Genesis, or whether it's telling about the future. Prophecy is divine revelation, whether it's about past, present, or future. Okay. The book of Revelation, in Revelation, I guess 1:3, is called a prophecy because it is a divine revelation to John. And at the very end of Revelation, if you'll look with me over at chapter 22 and verse 18, it talks about the book of Revelation. It says, I testify to everyone who hears the words of the prophecy of this book. See, this book doesn't mean the Bible, it means the book of Revelation. See, so the book of Revelation, all of it, is considered to be prophecy because it's talking about God in heaven and what God is going to do and what's going to happen and all the above. Okay. So with that, prophecy came in different ways. God spoke to Moses in a burning bush. In the book of Daniel, chapter 5, there was a hand that wrote on the wall. But that was prophecy. See, that was a divine revelation written on that wall. Some of the prophets, like Ezekiel, saw movies on the backs of their eyelids. And that was prophecy because that 3D movie that was given to him was a divine revelation. See, and John sees a bunch of those movies in the book of Revelation and tells us about those movies. And at points, he'll tell us some things about what those movies mean. So we have these in Revelation 12. We have one. And if you've got your paper there in front of you, where it got this woman, the woman, the dragon, and the child. And so if you'll notice in verse 1, he says, I saw a great sign in heaven. And if you'll notice again at verse 3, I saw another sign in heaven. So the first sign is the woman. The second sign is the dragon. Okay, and he tells us this. So what does that mean? Well, the word sign means a symbolic thing, a symbol. So the woman is a symbol of something. Okay, and the dragon is a symbol of something. Okay, and he's going to tell us in verse 9 what the dragon is. He says the dragon, the great dragon, was cast down, the ancient serpent, the one who is called the devil and Satan, the one who deceives the whole earth. See? So he tells you what that sign is. Okay? But the dragon and the woman. All right, so let's read a little bit, starting in verse 1. A great sign appeared in heaven, a woman arrayed with the sun, the moon under her feet, and upon her head a crown of 12 stars. Now, those of you that, excuse me, were in the class earlier, all of the 12s in the book of Revelation are things that belong to God, 12s and multiples of 12s. The 24 elders, the 144,000. You can't get any more 12-ish than that, can you? 12's 12. I learned my 12s when I was a kid. 12 to 144, Miss Cheryl. And the 144,000 is really, really 12-y. See? And then you've got, of course, the 12 tribes of Israel in chapter 7, and each one of those tribes, unlike the Old Testament, has 12,000 in it. See? And then you have in chapter 20, when he describes, or chapter 21, when he describes the holy city, it's got 12 foundations and 12 gates, and it's 12,000 stadia long and 12,000 stadia high. And it's got, 12 stones and 12 this and 12 that. It 12s you to death. No, ma'am. No. See, yeah, the 12 is a symbolic number. And the phenomenon that's observable is everything that has any kind of a 12 or multiple thereof on in Revelation is God stuff. Yes, ma'am. In the book of Revelation. Not necessarily everywhere, no, but in the book of Revelation, it has that characteristic. Okay. So the fact that this woman has a crown and her crown is a Stephanos, like the word Stephen with a PH, Stephanos, that means a victory crown. And the 24 elders have Stephanoi, victory crowns on their heads. And Christ in chapter 6 rides out with a Stephanos, a victory crown on his head. Revelation 2:10, be faithful unto death, and I will give you a Stephanos of life, a crown of life, Revelation 2:10. So the fact that she's got a victory crown and it's made up of 12 stars makes it extremely obvious that this is God's lady right here. Okay. And it says, literally, the literal translation of verse 2, and she had it in her stomach. It literally says, kai ekusa in gastri, G-A-S-T-R-I. Have you gastric, she had it in the stomach. That means she's got a baby. She got a baby in there, and a baby's about to come out. See? My wife taught me long ago, do not assume that a woman has a baby in there unless you absolutely know. And I've made that mistake as a young man, and I've stopped making that mistake anymore. But this one does. Okay. So she was pregnant, and she cried out in travail, ready to give birth. She was in birth pains, ready to give birth. She wasn't just pregnant, she was down to the last minute of bearing the baby. See? So you've got this beautiful woman with the crown, but she's pregnant and she's in the throes of having a baby. And now we shift to another sign who enters the picture. And another sign appeared in heaven. Behold, a great red dragon, having 7 heads and 7 horns, and upon his heads many crowns. But these crowns are not Stephanos. These are diadems. We sing church songs about diadems, The Greek word is diadema, which means kingly crowns. Okay? So this woman has a victory crown like they give the athlete that wins the contest, but this dragon has 7 heads, and on these heads are 7 kingly crowns. So we're talking about, governments and stuff like that are controlled by this dragon. And when you go to the next chapter, which is cheating, but it'll be okay in the Bible. if you go over here to verse 2 of chapter 13, it's talking about the beast. And it says, and I saw, let's see, yeah, verse 2. And I saw a throne, or I saw a beast like unto a leopard, feet like a bear, and mouth like a lion. And the dragon gave him his power and his throne and his great authority. So the dragon is the devil. We know that from 12:9. But the devil is giving some kind of a government, a king, his power and his throne and his authority. See? And in the book of Revelation, it is the Roman government that is persecuting Christians. But who gave the government the authority to persecute Christians? Well, the devil did. But if you go to Romans 13, it talks about how the powers that be are ordained by God, and that God gave the government the authority to keep law and order in society. So the idea that governments are ordained by God is well and good, except the devil gives them power to persecute Christians. God gives them power to maintain order in their society. But those are two different functions coming from two different forces. You see what I'm saying? So government is not like every government doesn't have a little halo around it, and all of those guys are good because, God gives them, God sets them in place and expects them to keep order in their society, but Satan gives them their power to persecute those that are good. So it's not as cut and dried there as some people might think, because you got your 13s, you got your Romans 13, but you got your Revelation 13. God gives the authority in Romans 13. The devil gives the authority in Revelation 13. Okay? So let's go back to chapter 12. We got this dragon and this pregnant woman. And it says here, starting again in verse 3, I saw another sign in heaven, and behold, a great red dragon having 7 heads and 7 horns, and upon his head 7 kingly crowns. And with his tail he dragged a third part of the stars of heaven and cast them down to the earth. And the dragon stood in front of the woman who was about to bring forth the child, so that he might eat the child up when he was born. So here's the silent movie going on. And you got this woman, and all of a sudden she's in labor, and here comes this mean dragon, and he's going to eat up this baby when the baby's born. See? Oh no, oh no, oh no. All right. But look at verse 5. The male child was born, who shall rule the nations with a rod of iron. Now, underline that little phrase where it says, who shall rule the nations with a rod of iron. And if your Bible has the footnotes, which it probably does, that's Psalm 2, verse 9. Psalm 2 is about God at Psalm 2, verse 9. That's on verse 5. And if your Bible footnotes Psalm 2 is about God and God's chosen king, and how God's king is going to rule over all the nations. Well, Jesus is God's king. He's the King of Kings and the Lord of Lords in the book of Revelation. So the baby child from Psalm 2 is Jesus. Okay, baby boy. So baby boy's about to be born. You might say, well, that means the woman is married. Not exactly. We'll get to that. But the little baby is definitely Jesus. So the baby child is the one who will rule the nations with a rod of iron, it says. And notice it says the child was caught up. Now that word caught up right there is the word that is translated by some people rapture. That's the same word that we have in 1 Thessalonians 4, where it says, then we that are alive shall together with them be caught up in the clouds, in the air, and we shall ever be with the Lord, So that's this word. So before the dragon can eat the baby, he's caught up to heaven. All right. So the drama that unfolds is, here's the woman, the hope of all the nations is this baby. The dragon's about to eat up the baby, but the baby is taken up to heaven. Okay, well, that's Christ, and Christ is taken up to heaven. When was Christ taken up into heaven? After his death and resurrection. Satan tried to defeat him but couldn't do it. He rose from the grave and he ascended into heaven. Okay, but now notice this. Then the woman, verse 6, fled into the desert, where there a place has been prepared by God, and there he shall nourish her, or she shall be nourished for 1,260 days. 1,260 days. Now, y'all forgot this because it's been too long ago. But there is a time period in the book of Revelation, and it's presented in 3 different ways. It's called 1,260 days. Now divide that by 12 and see what you get. See if y'all can do math. What? Well, that's 150. Okay. 1,260 days divide by 3, I meant. I'm sorry. Wait a minute. Yeah, divided by 3. I'm still not doing it right. And now I know what I'm doing. There's a doubt about that, but divide it by 30. That's what you're supposed to divide it by. Divide it by 30. Yeah. What does that say? 42 months. So the second way that is presented in the book of Revelation is 42 months, because it's 30-day months. 42 months. Sorry, I confused myself and others. So it's 1,260 days. It's presented as 42 months. Now, 42 months divided by 12 would be 3.5 years. So the 3.5 in the book of Revelation is this way: a time, times, and half a time, which is 3.5. See? So a time, times, and half a time, you'll see that in the book of Revelation. You'll see 42 months in the book of Revelation, and you'll see 1,260 days in the book of Revelation. But those are not 3 different periods of time. That's the same period of time spoken in 3 different ways. Have I lost you, or do I still have you? Okay, I lost myself there for a minute, but yeah. So let me give you some examples here. If you go back to chapter 11, go back to chapter 11, and let's go to the first couple of verses. There was given to me a measuring stick like a rod, and he said, rise and measure the temple of God and the altar and those that worship in it, and the outer court, leave it outside. Do not measure it, because it is given over to the Gentiles, and they shall trample the holy city underfoot for how long? 42 months. Now look at the next verse. And I will grant to my 2 witnesses, and they shall prophesy for how long? 1,260 days. But see, that's the same period of time as the 42 months. So while the Gentiles, which in the case of the book of Revelation would be the Romans, they're going to be trampling God's people. At the same time, God's preachers, God's prophets are going to be preaching. See? You with me? Same period of time. But see, when you flip the page, this is what I was trying to communicate to you. Some things remain the same in Revelation, even when the scene changes. The characters remain the same. The time period, this time period remains the same. So, see, when you flip the page and you go over to chapter 12, you get in verse 6, this woman is going to be nourished by God out in the desert for 1,260 days. Well, that's the same period we read a minute ago when the preachers are going to be preaching and when the Gentiles are going to be trampling. And in chapter 12, it's when the devil is chasing after this woman as she goes into the desert. Okay, same period of time. Now drop down to verse 14 in chapter 12. What does that say, Signe?
She would be taken care of for a times, and half a time out of the serpent's reach.
All right, but it says in verse 6 for 1,260 days. You see what I'm saying? And then you go back to chapter 11 and you got the same period of time there. Two different movies, but same period of time. All right. Now go over to chapter 13 and verse 5. Miss Jenny, what does that say?
The beast was given a mouth to utter proud words and blasphemies, to exercise his authority for 42 months.
Okay, so how long is this beast who is a ruling government? How long is he going to be able to do this bad stuff? 42 months.
Morning.
See?
Is it okay I bring a friend?
Sure, absolutely. Come in, sit down. So 42 months. Glad to have you here. 42 months, 1,260 days at times and half time. We're in Revelation chapter 12. All right, so in the Old Testament, you got to be joking me. When I think I have it on silent, I have it the other way. All right, there you go. All right, so in the Old Testament, turn to Daniel chapter 7. Daniel chapter 7. And let's see here. We can look about verse 25. Miss Patty, what does that say?
He shall speak words against the Most High, and shall wear out the saints of the Most High, and shall think to change the times and the law, and they shall be given into his hand for a time, times, and half a time.
So, ladies, this is Daniel 7, verse 25. In the book of Revelation, where does the book of Revelation get this period of time from? What Old Testament book does it come from? It comes from Daniel, and it comes from Daniel 7. And if you find Daniel 7 and verse 17, it's interesting because Daniel 7 is a vision of these four beasts that come up out of the sea. Okay. And the beast in Revelation is the main bad guy. See? And he is one of these beasts that come up out of the sea. But if you look at Daniel 7, verse 17, what does that say, Miss Janet? Daniel 7:17. All right, and some translations say kingdoms, kings or kingdoms that will rise out of the earth. And I know this gets involved. This is the problem with the book of Revelation. But when y'all were in Sunday school or when you were listening to sermons a long time ago, somebody told you about old King Nebuchadnezzar and his dream, and he had this dream of this statue that had four parts. It had a head of gold, it had a chest and arms of silver, it has a belly and thigh of brass, and it had a feet and legs of iron mixed with clay. And in that chapter, it says these four parts of the statue are four great kingdoms that shall arise out of the earth. Okay. And in, I guess it's Daniel chapter 2, verse 30 something, he says to King Nebuchadnezzar, you, O king, are the head of gold. So that's the Babylonian Empire. All right. And then he says, after you, another kingdom will arise, which will rule over the whole earth. Well, that was the Medo-Persian Empire. And he says, after them, a third kingdom will arise that'll be over the whole earth. And that was Alexander the Great and the Greeks, you know. And finally, there'll be a fourth kingdom, see, that'll going to be worse than them all. And that was the Roman Empire. All right. And then in Daniel 2:44, it says, in the days of those kings, the Roman kings, the God of heaven would set up a kingdom which would never be destroyed. Well, that's when Jesus comes into view. See, the Roman kings. Okay. So in Daniel 7, you have a very similar outline to Daniel chapter 2. You have, instead of 4 parts of the idol, you have 4 beasts that come up out of the sea. And those are those same 4 kingdoms, the Babylonian kingdom, the Medo-Persian kingdom, the Greek kingdom, and the Roman kingdom. And in both Daniel 2 and Daniel 7, all the attention is on that 4th kingdom, which is the Roman kingdom. And if you look at Daniel 7, look at verse 13 and 14. Daniel 7, 13 and 14. Now, who's that talking about? That's talking about Jesus Christ. But notice he comes in the time of the 4th kingdom, and he's the one that God gives all rule and authority over. So, see, you've got the earthly kingdom that's trying to stamp out the kingdom of Christ. And Daniel 7:25 says that period of that great persecution where they're trying to stamp out God's people, that's going to last a time, times, and half a time. Or, as the book of Revelation also puts it, 42 months, which is the same as 3.5 years, or 1,260 days. And you find it in all those forms there. But one of the keys to understanding it is you got to know that it comes from the book of Daniel and from those prophecies in the book of Daniel that say in the days of the 4th great world kingdom, the Roman kingdom, there would be a great persecution. It's called the Great Tribulation, where they would try to stamp out God's people from the face of the earth. And it would last a time, times, and half a time. See? So John, who writes the book of Revelation, he's banking on the fact that these people he's writing to understand that this comes from the book of Daniel. See? Because if you don't read the Old Testament, if you don't know these passages in the Old Testament, there's no way for you to understand what's going on here. So now let's back up. We went around the mulberry bush. I was talking about that time period because the picture in Revelation 12 is this beautiful woman. She's pregnant. She's about to have a baby. This dragon comes up and going to eat up the baby. The baby is born. She's caught up to the baby is caught up to heaven before the dragon can eat the baby. The woman then runs away into the desert, and the dragon is chasing her to persecute her for 1,260 days, or 3.5 years, or as it says in verse 14, a time, times, and half a time. Okay. But Daniel 7:25 says that he's going to persecute the saints for a time, times, and half a time. So see, the woman is God's people. The Christ comes from God's people. And after the Christ ascends, you've still got God's people here on the earth. And the devil is trying to stamp out God's people. See, that's the idea of the vision that's going on so far in chapter 12. Yes, ma'am. What's Rome?
They're talking about Rome.
The persecution is coming from Rome. But as you go over to chapter 13 and verse, what is it? 2 or 3, 2 at the end. It's the dragon that gives the beast, Rome, its power, its throne, and its authority to do what? Persecute God's people.
Jenny,
Right.
are you trying to say that this was about the Roman persecution and not a future prophecy?
No, that's what the Bible's saying.
Well, well, I'm just trying to clarify what she's
Yeah.
trying to get at.
Yes.
To get at that this is the Roman, and this is not something that's going to happen.
Yeah, this is not something that's going to happen in the future. Now, when we get over to Revelation 20, verses 7 through 10, then we've got something that's going to happen in the future. But right here, this is talking about the great tribulation, the Roman persecution that was going to happen right in the time of John and right thereafter. See? And even in the first part of Revelation, he says, these are things which must quickly come to pass. Okay, so most of the book of Revelation has already happened. There's a little bit at the end that hasn't already happened. But a lot of people will try to go back to Daniel, and they'll try to make that fourth kingdom mean some modern kingdom, some future kingdom. But if you start with Babylon, and he says he's talking about world kingdoms, see, those that ruled the whole known world. You got Babylon, and then right after that, you had the Persian Empire, the Medo-Persian Empire. Then you had Alexander the Great, and all over from India all the way to the other side of the world. And then you had the Romans. See, and the Roman kingdom is that fourth kingdom. Otherwise, you've got Jesus coming to earth in our time instead of Jesus coming to earth when he did come to earth in the time of the Roman kings. In the days of these kings, the fourth kingdom, God of heaven will set up a kingdom which shall never be destroyed. That's when the Son of Man comes to God, and God gives him all rule and authority and power. What did Jesus say when he rose from the dead? He said, all authority hath been given to me in heaven and on earth, right? So anyway, what we've got is, we're going back to chapter 12, verse 6. The dragon is not successful in eating up the baby that this woman has. The baby's caught up to heaven. The woman runs away, and the dragon's chasing her into the desert to persecute her. But look at verse 7. And there was war in heaven. Wait a minute now. When did this war happen? Well, it happened after the baby was caught up to heaven. After Christ was caught up to heaven. Well, when did that happen? Well, he died, he rose from the dead, and then he ascended into heaven, didn't he? So then there was war in heaven. Now let's read this. There was war in heaven. Michael and his angels, they did battle with the dragon. And the dragon made war and his angels. So you got two sides. You've got Michael and his angels, and you've got the dragon and his angels. Well, who's the dragon? Look at verse 9 in chapter 12, Revelation 12. The great dragon was cast down. Revelation 12, verse 9. The great dragon was cast down, the ancient serpent, the one who is called the devil and Satan, the one who deceives the whole world, was cast down to the earth, and his angels were cast down with him. So after Christ ascends to heaven, there's war in heaven. The archangel, you got two archangels here. Arch means ruling. Arch means the general. So Michael is one archangel that rules over all the angels of light. The devil, the dragon, Satan, whatever you want to call him, he's another archangel that rules. No, the word Lucifer comes from Isaiah 14, and it's talking about the king of Babylon. A lot of people think that's talking about Satan, and it's not. It means a bright or light bearer. It's a very flattering name, and it's got nothing to do with Satan. Isaiah 14. No, ma'am. The Bible never calls Satan Lucifer. All right, y'all are killing me. Están me matando. That means you're killing me. All right, so let me have your Bible here. Turn to Isaiah 14. You got your Psalms, Proverbs, Ecclesiastes, Isaiah, Jeremiah, Isaiah 14. And let's see here. Look at verse 4. Look at verse 4. Isaiah chapter 14, verse 4. You will take this taunt up against the king of Babylon. See that? All right. So this part that's set off in poetic form, it's God's message to the who? The king of Babylon. All right. Now look down at verse 10. All of them will answer and say to you. Well, who's the you? Well, it's the king of Babylon. Go back to verse 4. See? You too have become weak as we. You have become like us. Your pomp is brought down to Sheol, the sound of your harps. Maggots are laid as a bed beneath you. Worms are your covers. How you are fallen from heaven, O day star. Hers says day star. Some of yours will say Lucifer, son of the dawn. Now, in Spanish, any of y'all know a little bit of Spanish? La luz. Prenda la luz. What does that mean? Luz. Light. Lucifer means light bearer. See, and it's talking about the king of Babylon who was the greatest power on earth, but he's going to fall down. He's not going to be anything anymore. See, that's what Isaiah is talking about. The king of Babylon, go back to verse 4. Well, he's talking about, you were high up above everything else, and now you're going to fall down. But in context of Isaiah 14, there's absolutely nothing about the devil in here. This is about the king of Babylon and his arrogance and how he was thrown down. Yep. And I know in all the movies it calls Satan Lucifer, but the Bible does not use that word for him.
Well, where did they get it?
They misunderstand this passage about talking about the devil, and it's not. Well, your translation probably says day star or something like that. Morning star. Yours says morning star. Yeah. So that bright light, that loose, that's the morning star, the day star, the light bearing star. That's the idea. The king of Babylon. Yeah. No. That word is never used anywhere in the Bible to describe Satan or an angel or anything else. It talks about the king of Babylon.
Revelation.
Well, we're supposed to be in the book of Revelation. Yeah, that is rough. But now if y'all can find it somewhere, let me know. Yes. Yes, that's where it comes from. People put these two passages together that don't belong together. If you look at the other passages in the Old Testament, for example, in the book of Daniel, Daniel chapter 4, Nebuchadnezzar, the great king of Babylon, comes out and he says, "It's not this great Babylon which I have built with my own power and my own authority and my own glory." And then God slaps him down and makes him eat grass like an animal. See, that's what this passage is about. Satan.
So his name's devil or Satan or both?
Well, see, the name that's given to him is in the Old Testament, Hasatan. Ha means the, Satan means enemy. So he's called the enemy. We don't know from the Bible his name. He's called Hasatan in the Old Testament, the enemy. And in the New Testament, he's called the devil, diabolos, which means accuser or slanderer or accuser. So in the Old Testament, you don't read the word devil because the Hebrew word is Satan, Satan. In the New Testament, the word devil means accuser, the one who talks to God and says, you need to send that Deborah or that Signy or whoever to hell because they've done all these bad things, and he just points out all of our sins. He's the accuser. He's the slanderer. He says bad stuff. Which Well, in the Old Testament, he's called Satan, Satan. It's actually pronounced Satan, Satan, but you have an article in front of it, like the The, So the Old Testament has the word enemy a lot of places, but Satan is called the enemy, like the major enemy, the arch enemy. He's the enemy. H-A, and then Satan, the enemy.
Okay, so.
Okay.
The other things had names. They had names.
Yeah, we only know a few names. Yeah, and he may have had name that we don't know, but we don't know it from the Bible.
An angel that was over music.
We have no clue. No clue.
He could have been just like an angel.
Probably not. No, probably not. Because in Revelation 12, yeah, all of the angels are following him, and they're fighting all the angels that are following Michael. So actually in the Bible, there's only two angels mentioned in the Bible that are archangels, Michael and Satan. One is the general over all these angels of darkness that followed him out of when he fell, and we can get into this whole rabbit hole of the different stages of the fall of Satan, because all the way back in Genesis, he was already starting to go against God. He tempted the woman. In Genesis 6, you had the sons of God who came down among the daughters of men, and that was another step down. In Revelation 12, you have, after the death and resurrection of Christ, defeated sin and death and all that, then Satan was cast down from heaven. That's what we have here in Revelation 12 to the earth. He could no longer come before God and accuse God's people. See? Like with Job, yes. Yeah. Like in Job chapter 2, that it came to pass on the day when the sons of God came to present themselves before the Lord, and Satan was among them. The Lord said to Satan, "Where have you been?" And he said, "I've been to and fro, roaming through the earth, And he says, "Have you considered my servant Job?" So there was still access some way. We don't understand all that, but that's the way it was until this, and then he's cast out of heaven. The only place that says it in these words is here in Revelation, but there's a time sequence here, and I'm going to show you that in just a minute. You need the time set. Well, you've got the woman who's having the baby, who is Christ. The baby is caught up to heaven. That gives us a time point. Then there's war in heaven. Then Satan is cast down to the earth.
That's what's confusing me, because I'm thinking, well, I thought he was working on Eve.
Yeah, but he still had access to heaven. See? So look here in verse 9, and we'll get to this. Look at 12:9 of Revelation. And the great dragon was cast down, the ancient serpent, Patty, that's the one in the Garden of Eden, the one who is called Devil and Satan, the one who deceives the whole world. He was cast down to the earth, and his angels were cast down with him. Now, once he's cast down, listen to what happens. And I heard a great voice in heaven saying, underline this little word, now. See that word now?
Yeah.
Now has come the salvation and the power and the kingdom of our God and the authority of his Christ. Well, when was it that Christ said, all authority has been given to me in heaven and on earth? Right, when he rose from the dead, and all that. So now has come the salvation. When did the salvation that is in Christ, did it come before he died on the cross or after he died on the cross? After. All right. Because, notice verse 10 again, because the accuser of our brethren, who accuses them before our God night and day, has been thrown down. And they, that would be our brethren, overcame him, that would be Satan, through the blood of the Lamb, but they couldn't do it until the blood of the Lamb was shed. You with me? There's your time sequence. Now has come. See, now since Christ is risen and the devil's been cast down, his blood has been shed, now has come the salvation. They overcame him through the blood of the Lamb and through the word of their testimony, because they loved not their life even unto death. So rejoice, O heavens, and you that dwell in them. And woe to the earth and the sea, because the devil has come down to you, and he has great anger, knowing that he has just a little while. So now the devil is thrown down to the earth.
I'm just gonna-
that blood, you can conquer the devil through baptism.
Yeah, through contacting his blood, through having his blood cleanse you every day. Yeah. But now see, look at verse 13. You got to keep watching the movie. Y'all are antsy. And when the dragon saw that he was thrown down to the earth, watch it now, he persecuted the woman.
Mine says
Who-
pursued.
Okay. You've got the word dioko, which means either pursue or persecute. And in this context, it can mean either, but he's pursuing her with malintent. He's persecuting her. See? And so he persecuted the woman who bore the male child. And there was given the woman the two wings of an eagle, a great eagle, that she should fly away into the desert unto her own place, where she will be nourished for a time, times, and half a time. Now, John, where'd you get that period of time? I got it from the book of Daniel, from Daniel 7, verse 25, where he said that in the fourth great kingdom, they would punish the saints of God and persecute the saints of God for a time, times, and half a time. But while the devil and his henchmen are punishing the woman, what's God doing? He's caring for the woman. The woman is God's people. She's God's people before the time of the church, because she's the one that produces the Christ. She's God's people after Christ raises from the dead. So that's why I'm saying she's not just Mary or something. She's God's people that produces, and God's faithful people that continue when he rose from the dead and went back. That's who she is. And in the Old Testament, think about this. Does God ever refer to his people in the Old Testament as like his wife or a woman? Does he ever do that in the Old Testament? Israel broke my covenant, although I was a husband to her, says the Lord. In the prophets, y'all haven't read Hosea lately or anything like that? Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Yeah. So, God's people are projected as his wife. In the New Testament, is the church projected as the wife? Yeah, the bride, sure. So, the woman is God's people. So then see, you got the pictures on the back. You got the war in heaven, and then you got the dragon pursuing the woman. It's a weird movie. So y'all stopped the movie several times. So what y'all need to do is you need to read chapter 12 and watch the movie. So here's the movie. You start the movie. Here's this beautiful woman, big, fat, pregnant, ready to have a baby. She starts, oh, it's time. Her water breaks. The baby's coming out. She's ready to do it. The big dragon comes up. He's about to eat up the baby. She has the baby. Oh, little baby boy. And the dragon's about to eat the baby boy. And all of a sudden, God snatches the baby boy up to heaven. Then all of a sudden the camera switches to this great war of the devil and his angels and Michael and his angels. And there's this terrible war, and the devil is defeated, and all of them are thrown down to the earth. And the dragon is so mad that he didn't win this whole thing. And so he looks over there, and there's that poor woman, and she's fleeing out into the desert. And here he goes after that woman. And it looks like he's going to catch the woman. See, the movie's still going on. And he barfs out this big river of water out of his mouth. That's this picture right here. And it's like that big flood in Texas. It's about to overwhelm the woman. Oh, poor woman. but the ground opens up and swallows the water, and the woman is saved from the big river that the dragon barfs out of his mouth. See, that's the movie. So you're looking at me like, that is weird. Yes, it's weird. If you don't want weird, you don't want the book of Revelation. But look at verse 17. See, this is where we come down to the last of this vision. And the dragon was angry with the woman. Watch it now. And he went away to make war with the rest of her offspring. Who are those? Those that keep the commandments of God and hold the testimony of Jesus. So see, that's all of them. And he still does that against us. You know, Peter said he's like a roaring lion going seeking whom he may devour. But in particular, in the book of Revelation, it's talking about that great persecution where it tried to stamp out the church from the face of the earth.
It's really easy to see it that way if you use dragons and.
Yeah.
But it's really hard to teach it to someone
I know.
who can only see dragons.
And that's why a lot of times I start studying with somebody that wants to seeking about God and Christ and everything. And I say, let's study. And they say, oh, let's study the book of Revelation. And I say, nuh-uh. I say, no. Yeah, but see, the reason is the book of Revelation is the last book that anybody ought to study. Because the book of Revelation assumes that you have a really good knowledge of the Old Testament before you crack the book.
So can you play the movie?
Okay, so here's God's people, which is the Jews, which would be hard to picture on a movie. But out of these Jews comes the Christ. And it looks like the Christ is going to be defeated when he's in the Garden of Gethsemane and the Romans are arresting him and all that kind of stuff. But it seems like he's defeated when he dies on the cross. But the movie goes and he's raised up from the dead and he's taken up to heaven, and these disciples are still left on earth, and they get the church started and everything, and people start persecuting the church. See, so during this time there's a war up in heaven, and Satan is cast out of heaven. Satan's so mad and he tries to stamp out the church. See, it's hard to picture that because Satan is a spiritual being and he's using governments and people to try to stamp out the church. But God is trying to take care of the church at the same time Satan is trying to destroy him. So you could picture, God and Christ with their arms around the church while all this tribulation is going on down on earth. But the woman, makes it through that great persecution, but the devil still wants to destroy all of her offspring, all those people that still try to keep the commandments of God and hold the commandments of Jesus. So that's kind of the movie here. Okay? You guys asked for it. I'm just doing it because y'all asked for it. Do you want to keep going or no? Man. Well, next time we're going to talk about beasties. The beast. All right, in Revelation 13. But to read, here's your preparation for next time. Read Daniel chapter 7.
Is the 3.5 years, what time period on earth is that referring to? Is it an actual 3.5 years?
No, it's referring to the time of the Roman persecution, which really lasted from the late 1st century into the 4th century until Constantine came to power, and he was the one in 313 that legalized Christianity. It was illegal. It was a persecuted religion all the way until 313 AD. The Edict of Milan legalized Christianity for the first time.